Hi, my name is Stephanie Moore, and I'm going to introduce you to Roger Kaufman, who is certainly one of the history makers of the field and who is also one of my advisors and whom I consider to be my mentor. I currently am at the University of Virginia and spent some time with Roger recently down in Tallahassee interviewing him about different aspects of his career. With Roger, of course, he's very well known for needs assessment in the field. But in this interview, I wanted to bring out some things that I've had an opportunity to learn with him that may not necessarily always come out in a book or something like that. So I really wanted to create an opportunity where people could get to know the Roger that I've gotten to know and have a chance to learn some of the things from him that I feel have been invaluable for me and my personal development as well. So you have a background in psychology as well as statistics?
Some words my father said in my first year at Hopkins. He said, son, the world is like a course in calculus. And I said, oh boy, here's something else I'm not going to understand. He was a mathematical physicist. And I said, what's that, Dad, being a good son? And he said, well, the first course that everybody takes is differentiation. The second course that if people take, they don't apply, is integration. Differential calculus and integral calculus. And that stuck with me all these years, is that there's both kinds of calculus in our lives as well. One is the integrative, holistic, and the other is the individual building block kind of stuff. And so all this kind of major was me exploring for something I didn't know about. I was looking for, how does this all go together? Does it all go together? Is there sense in all of this? And it finally came to me, yeah, the sense, at least to me, is in terms of societal value added for all people, not just one group or the other, and getting them to define it instead of imposing it.
Well, I wonder how much your background in psychology really played a part in how you developed MEGA.
The psychology piece really gave me some of the basic ways to think about things in terms of hypotheses and research questions. What questions do you want answers to, and how do you get those? And how do you know those questions are important questions? And that's how I got to the needs assessment base at the 3 levels, MEGA, macro, marker.
There are a number of articles, including one by you, that I always felt set the stage for how the field moves beyond any one technology. You focused on assessment.
I wrote an article way back when for the then ACT journal. As I recall, it was called From How to What to Why, which tried to make the case of we know how, we're very good at this and getting better and have some research. Then we were starting off listening to people like Bob Maker and others about measurable objectives. That was the what. The thing that we weren't dealing with so much is why do we do this in the first place? And so I was trying to set the stage for at least the way I was thinking about things, and of course, being egotistical, wanted other people to think the same way. There are some people who bought into it, and some other people said, no, I don't want to do that. That's not practical, that's not real world. What we do is we do what people tell us to do. And even if that means rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic and forgetting about any kind of positioning and looking for icebergs, they went ahead and do it. And indeed, we have a lot of people who still feel uncomfortable with linking how to what and to why, and making it an integrated system instead of fragmented.
Folks in the field could begin to draw linkages between what you've developed over time and how that plays out in their very real jobs and lives.
Frequently, what people are quoting me on is needs assessment. And of course, what I did is expanded in the 1979 book I wrote with Fenn English on needs assessment. We started expanding where you do a needs assessment as gaps in results. That's absolutely critical because the focus on results. And if you use need as a verb or in a verb sense, you don't get that gap in results, you get a gap in process. And we expanded that from what I call products, the building block results, which, for instance, most instructional designers will deal with, or media people will deal with, production people will deal with, to outputs, what the organization can or does deliver outside of itself. and then to what now is called MEGA, outcomes, the societal impact and the value added, and try to get that alignment. And so I came to MEGA in that process, and I came to MEGA in another strange way. I don't know whether you're interested or not. Well, anybody out there who has kids probably knows what my son, when he was about 6 or 7, did. We were driving in the car, and Jack kept asking, "Why, Daddy?" And I kept on saying, "Why?" And I got between the third and fourth explanation of why, and I ran out of reasons. And it came up to me, because I said so. And I knew as soon as I said that, that's not rational. And so that's what started pushing me into more in the direction I said earlier, from how to what to why. And the why had to include adding measurable value for all internal and external partners. And so that's how MEGA, actually my son pushed me into that by his incessant questioning of why, Daddy. So
I think all of that's really tied up together, and you address that pretty directly. You're very specific about us distinguishing between ends and means.
And the conventionalism is not to talk about the chain of consequences. And so they tend to want to get to the means. We're going to get the police there. We're going to get the fire there. We're going to have counseling available in the schools. We're going to have credentialed nursing staff. And the answer is yes. And what's the consequences of that in terms of ends, which is health, safety, survival, and well-being. And so that's why I make a big deal over the difference but relationship between ends and means. And that's why I define need as a noun, as a gap in results, so that you don't blur those. Why would you want to pick a solution until you knew that you had gaps in results that should be closed? If you don't have that data, how do you pick a means? How do you know what instruction to design? Or how do you know how to do workplace layout? Or how do you do mediation? I mean, you can do it, but wouldn't it be nice if it closed a useful gap in results? So that distinction, but relationship between ends, results and consequences, and means, the resources and how to do it, is vital and unfortunately very, very often blurred.
I think as you talk about societal impact, most people are prone to think of that in terms of environmental effects. And while that's a part of your model, that's not the totality of it.
So we started asking people from almost around the world, what kind of world do you want for your children and grandchildren? And we want it in terms of results. And usually they'd say, well, you know, I want more money spent on education. And I said, no, let's put that aside for now, because maybe it'll end up with that, maybe it won't. What do you want for your children and grandchildren? And usually, if you ask them about them, their progeny, their future, they can give you very clear answers. If you ask them about themselves, they say, oh, this practical real world, I know I'll never get more money for my programmers. But if you ask them about that, so we literally went around the world, almost around the world, and asked people, what kind of world do you want for your children and grandchildren? And when you sorted out the ends and means from that, there was a very, very clear consensus. And I ended up calling it mother's rule, because you ask a mother what they want for their child. They don't want them murdered, raped, permanent disabilities, infectious diseases from which they die or become permanently disabled. They want them healthy and happy and surviving. And so that's we came up with some indicators for society, what I call the ideal vision, the kind of world we together want to create for tomorrow's child. And it talks about things including contributors to that environment. But environment, what difference does the environment make if it isn't on the basis of health, safety, well-being, and continuation of life?